Today we are going to see, I would introduce you to Tailwind CSS. In the React, remember that it has nothing to do with the React and Tailwind. It is just a CSS framework. So far you have written a plain old CSS by your hand. Now what I wanted to do, it's a CSS only. So let's create a day 91. We have created folder. Now tell me the commands for creating project. Cd desktop, cd month, cd day 91. Okay, tell me the commands for creating the React project using Vite. Have you created this or not?
Yes.
Have you created Vite or not? Have you created Vite project or not? I'm asking you guys.
Yes, sir.
Npm create Vite @latest. Correct? Vite @latest. Hit the enter. So name of the project, React Tailwind. Okay, hit the enter. Which CSS framework? React. And plain JavaScript. And if you see, some things have been created. Okay, now to go to the docs. See here what you need to do if you want to add a React and the Tailwind. What is Tailwind? A CSS framework. What is Tailwind? A CSS framework. So where you were writing a lot of CSS classes. So far you were writing a lot of CSS classes. Just to getting started, or just to apply the basic kind of CSS to the basic kinds of CSS to your project. But Tailwind gives you, if you go here, Tailwind, a utility first CSS framework packed with the CSS classes like Flex, PT4, Text Center, and other things. It's a packed. So what you can say, ready-made classes they have given. You don't need to create a separate class, and then you don't need to create a separate class called as Flex and then display Flex and other things. It will do automatically. Right? Hello?
Yes.
Now, if you open this link, there is an official documentation. How do you start with the Vite? You can see here. So first you need to create the project at Vite latest, my project, template, React. Okay, then you need to do something called as npm install Tailwind post CSS auto prefixer. So 3 packages you need to install. Then npx Tailwind init. This configuration you need to write. Index.css you need to write. So I will do that thing in front of you and you can check. So this is the folder we have, cd day 91, again cd React Tailwind. Okay, then npm install. Directly you can copy paste from here. You can copy this line and paste it here. Hit the enter. Auto prefixer and other things. I have pasted this. So few things would be getting added to your project. If you go to the package.json, can you see here React DOM, and can you see here post CSS, Tailwind CSS, with these things have been added here. Post CSS, Tailwind, auto prefixer, with these things have been added. Now this thing npx Tailwind init, just go here and paste this, hit the enter. Created the post CSS. We'll see what do you mean by post CSS and other thing. Config file. Here if you can see, there is one config file, post CSS config, right? And Tailwind config is also automatically created, that we will see shortly. So this file, post CSS config, right? Now add the paths of your template and export default, something like this. So index.html, we need to copy. If you see in the tailwind config.js, in the content, can you see here is the content array, this content array. Into this content array, we just need to add these two lines. Just copy. In the content array, these two things. Then in the index.css, add tailwind base. So these things need to be added. Just open here. So whatever is your main CSS is, index.css, just remove everything and add tailwind base, add tailwind components, add tailwind utilities, and then simply type npm run dev. Let's start the server. Npm run dev, it will start the server. Localhost, this URL, just copy this, paste it. Okay, let's go index. Let's keep the index.css. This is the thing. Remove all the things that we don't need. Delete it, all these things, right? Even delete this. Export default, you may write in this way also, and this should return a paragraph from here, and here you can say, hey, hi, hey, hi. Can you see? Here you can say div. This would be div, hey, hi. Now I want to take this guy to the center, so we need to have the flex. Can you see? Class name flex. Okay, this would be the flex automatically. And justify center. Can you see? Can you see? For this you need to create the class actually, display flex, right? So you will create your own class over here. You'll create your own class like flx or flx, and inside that you'll write display flex. And then you will attach, instead of this flx, right? And here display flex, and here you can say justify content center. You will do this thing, and then it will come to the center, flx. So here app.css is there. We need to import, just a minute, let us see the default imports. Yeah, can you see app.css? Let's remove unwanted things and just keep return. div over here, and hey hi, here you can say class name flx. You created this class flx, and can you see here it is the center. But technically you don't need to write this class. If you are using Tailwind says that if you wanna, can you see these two things, display flex and justify content center? This can be written in this way: flex, this is a built-in class in the Tailwind, and justify center, and justify what? Center. So meaning of these two lines is equals to this. Can you see you don't need to create the separate class, and result is same over here. You getting my point? Hello?
Yes, sir.
What do you mean by Tailwind CSS? This is only the Tailwind. Internally, it will create the classes. Internally, it will create the classes. Presently, you don't have that. If I remove this, still it will work. See, app.css. You don't need it, and still it will work. You may remove this import also. The theory behind the flex is same, display flex. Justify center is nothing but what? Justify content center. There is no difference. Then what Tailwind CSS gives you? Rapidly build the modern websites without ever leaving your HTML. This is the utility first CSS framework, packed with the classes like flex pt, means padding top, text center. Now if I want to give a margin top empty 5, empty what? 5, can you see little margin have been added. You don't need to create a separate class and then apply the class over here. So you can apply the classes like utilities in this way. You can apply the classes like utilities in this way. So these are the built-in classes which are coming from the CSS. Can you see when you say, if you hover over the cursor, what do you mean by dot flex class gets created internally? You don't need to create it. So when you write flex, this dot flex class gets automatically created, and display colon flex, it will happen internally. You don't need to write it. Whenever you do justify content center, can you see this class would be getting created internally, and justify content center would be getting automatically. When you hover the cursor over here, margin top empty 5 means what? Margin top 1.25 rem. This will happen automatically, so that whenever you use Tailwind, you don't need to worry about creating the classes. Okay, now what is the post CSS? What is what? Post CSS. If you see post CSS, let's go here. Post CSS. Post CSS, a tool transforming CSS with the JavaScript. Transforming what? CSS with the JavaScript. Post CSS, and increasing code readability. Add a vendor prefixes to the CSS. Now see what is the auto prefixer. This also we have used. Auto prefixer. Parse the CSS and add a vendor prefixes. Vendor prefixes by can I use. Now see here. So whenever you talk about the auto prefixer, name itself is suggesting it is prefixing. Now what it is prefixing, we will see. So just a minute. Now, when you talk about the auto prefixer, right? Auto prefixer is a post CSS plugin that automatically add the vendor prefixes. Now, what do you mean by vendor prefixes? Right? So if you go here and dot flx, so here display flex is actually a thing that you will write. So you'll write this thing. Okay. Now what auto prefixer does internally, display hyphen WebKit flex. See here, WebKit means for the Chrome browsers, and display MS flexbox. Now when you write this thing, auto prefixer will do these things. Auto prefixer will do what? These things. So we have seen that. Do you remember we have seen this part? Framework dependent CSS. Means WebKit means what? Your Chrome browser. MS means what? Microsoft. So this MS, which means that this flex will is a global thing, but for the vendor specific, this is for the Chrome browser, and this is for, you can say, Microsoft browsers. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Are you getting that? All of you?
Yes.
So whenever you see here, display flex, that you will write. But for Internet Explorer, Microsoft, you need this command to work on this. On the WebKit, presently you don't require it because all the browsers support this display flex. But still, if you want to add the vendor prefixes is nothing but what? The auto prefixer. What is the post CSS? Transforming CSS with the JavaScript plugin. It provides a framework for writing using various plugins that can handle the different tasks that is related to the CSS pre-processing. Now you need these two dependencies over here. If you see, Tailwind CSS is a Tailwind CSS. Dependencies related to the Tailwind CSS, it will install by this. Then there is something called as post CSS. For auto prefixing, this requires. And what do you mean by auto prefixer that we have seen? Is a post CSS plugin automatically add the vendor prefixes. Now what do you mean by vendor prefixes? WebKit is the vendor prefix. MS is the vendor prefix. Correct? So you don't need it. Just an example, I have written it. The Tailwind CSS does it automatically for you. Internally, it does do that thing automatically. Getting my point? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Then it has created post CSS config. So if you want to add some or plugins related to the post CSS, you can add it over here. And if you want to add some plugins related to auto prefixer, you can add it over here. There is no problem. Similarly, Tailwind configuration, which files to check? Which files to check? So here if you see, index.html, and can you see, you need to check the content of which files, because we are going to write the CSS in index.html, and the JS files, JSX files, TS files, TSX files. You need to check these files. You need to check these files for the the conversion, which means that it will go inside this app.jsx file. It will take this flex class, it will take this justify content class, and it will convert it to the normal CSS. It will convert it to what? Normal CSS. You getting my point? Now I can show you that also. Just a minute. Just a minute. I wanted to show you something. Go to the package.json and we can create one script here. Tailwind build src index.css output.css. Okay, now let's go here. Npm run build:css. Build:css. Now in the src output.css, just refresh it. Yeah, can you see output.css? So from your things, whatever you have applied, can you see here? It has created that CSS. Hello? And this CSS contains one class called as flex. See here. Dot flex, display flex. Dot justify center, this thing. Dot mt5, this thing. It will create these files. So whatever classes you will apply over here, internally, they would be getting converted to the normal CSS only. But what Tailwind is doing, Tailwind is saying that, boss, you don't need to create a class for this. I will create the class for this. Can you see? Automatically, by using auto prefixer and other things, post CSS, it will create these classes. Right? By looking at your which files, here you are saying in the Tailwind config, sorry, not here. In the Tailwind config, here you are saying kindly check index.html. Here I can write the Tailwind classes, or you can check this source folder. Inside the source folder, you can check any name. This is this 2 stars for subfolders of the src. There might be multiple subfolders of the src, and inside that subfolder, star represents any name, .js, whatever. These might be the extensions. You can search inside the js files, which means that app.jsx. So here can be app.jsx. It will find, please find those classes. I have applied some Tailwind related things over there also. Correct? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Other members? So what is tailwind? Remember that once again I'm telling you, tailwind has nothing to do with the React. React has nothing to do with the React has nothing to do with the tailwind. Tailwind can be used independently. You can create the React project. You can create the React project without tailwind and by writing plain CSS. By writing what? The way you have created the project, JavaScript and plain CSS, you can do same thing for the React also. React has nothing to do with, again I'm saying, React has nothing to do with the Tailwind CS. Why we are doing React? For choosing a better way of writing CSS, easiest way of writing CSS. Otherwise, you need to write this file on your own. These many things are automatically generated for you. Otherwise, you need to add these things. You need to write these things for you. Whatever classes you will use over here, all of them will have some CSS code behind it. And that code would be getting generated automatically. This output.css, we just have written a command. If you look at this command, build colon CSS, Tailwind is one of the node package. Build is one of the command inside the Tailwind package. So here you are saying that source, check the index.css file. Hyphen O means the output file. Generate the output file in a source folder itself. Named it as output.css. So here you have index.css, where all the things you have written. Where all the things you have written. Index.css is imported in if you go index.html here is the main.jsx, and automatically it will import the index.css. And you don't need this thing. Why you don't need this thing? Because the CSS, for very rare things we will create the CSS if you are using the Tailwind, just like the responsive design and other things. Otherwise this is enough. Adding these utility classes, these classes are called the utility classes. Adding these utility classes to your HTML element is enough. You can use the Tailwind in plain old DOM projects. You can create the DOM project. You can create the DOM project, right? Normal DOM project, plain HTML project, plain CSS, JavaScript is there. And simply you can add the way we have referred the documentation for React, right? There is a simple documentation also available over there, right? Same documentation, similar documentation you will find for the HTML and other things. So today we have seen how to add HTML, React, how to add your Tailwind CSS to your React project. And from tomorrow, we will actually use And tomorrow we will actually use the React concepts. We will understand the React concepts. So revise this much. Okay. Tomorrow revise this much. And tomorrow we will continue with the next part. And that is related to the core React. You don't know what do you mean by this thing actually. And we will see this thing from tomorrow. Fine team, I will push this much code. React and Tailwind integration. It has Tailwind is not a new concept. It's a plain old CSS only, but the better way of writing the CSS or easy way of writing the CSS is the Tailwind. Okay. I will use the all the CSS concepts that we have learned, but now using Tailwind. If you have worked on the HTML and the CSS project, you will understand this in a better way. If you have worked on the JavaScript project, you will understand React in much better way. If you have not worked on that, that is well and good, no problem. You will understand still React in a better way. Fine. Let's call it for a day. We'll meet tomorrow. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm disconnecting.